What is up, Bat Family? Welcome to a brand new recap, review, and breakdown of The Riddler Year 1, Issue 2. Now, if you're brand new here to this series on the channel, essentially what we're doing is going over the events in the latest canonical prequel issue to that of the events leading up to the Batman movie. This is literally exploring Edward Nashton's roots, how he got onto the corruption of Gotham, how he went from just being a forensic accountant to the guy who geared up to be the Riddler. How did he literally stumble across all of the inner workings of the Gotham Renewal Fund? Well, we're seeing all of that in this comic book series written by Paul Dano with the artwork, the amazing artwork by Stevan Subic. Now, a quick recap of issue 1. We saw Edward Nashton at his job of being a forensic accountant. He's got a caseworker called Zach, who's a complete douchebag. He acts like a jerk and pretty much takes credit for everything that Edward does when he hands the work into him. And so Edward is pretty much invisible to everyone in his life, at work, in Gotham City. And we get some inner monologue commentary as Edward walks around Gotham City, pretty much showcasing his feelings. He's seeing everyone's happiness in the city that tells them every day after day that they are fractured and broken, and it pretty much just disgusts him. We can't forget that Edward was an orphan. He grew up in Wayne Manor at the orphanage that got turned to an orphanage from Thomas and Martha Wayne. That's when they moved into Wayne Enterprises, the tower. And he was given this false promise, this lie of renewal that we're exploring more and more in issue 1 and in issue 2, where we actually get to see some Thomas Wayne scenes. We get to see Edward Nashton's fascination with the Batman grow with this vigilante bat that has been spotted around Gotham, with Edward even witnessing the Batman during year 1 take down some criminals, offering inspiration to Edward as he sees it as someone who is tired of being afraid, someone standing up to the city saying that they're not gonna take it anymore. And obviously with the events of the Batman movie, when we finally get that interrogation scene, he genuinely thought that they were gonna be friends. Like, he was this inspiration that made him, as we know, Edward is very tired of the city. He wants to stand up to all of this, but he goes about it in quite a different way. So this is what we're seeing unfold in this first issue and into the second issue. But the journey really kicks off in his day job as a forensic accountant when he notices a discrepancy with some numbers for the accounts of the New Beginnings Animal Rescue. Now, good old caseworker Zach takes this to Mr. Stone, the boss in their division, and he returns down to Edward and says that Mr. Stone said it was nothing, but he offered Zach to go out to dinner and not Edward, who put all the work in. Edward then follows Mr. Stone all the way to a diner instead of just kind of bringing it up to him at the office, and he introduces himself and brings up the irregular patterns and the 4-digit numbers, but Mr. Stone's just like, I told you it was nothing. Not only that, you followed me here. That's very inappropriate. And again, this makes Edward feel like he's really stupid and very far from being a normal human being. But Edward didn't really want to give up here. He goes to the New Beginnings Animal Rescue and asks for a Mr. Higgins because he noticed that was a name that popped up in relation to New Beginnings when he attended a court trial earlier that day. Mr. Higgins was known to be associated with the Maroni organization, so you can see how everything's starting to open up a little bit more. But he gets spooked when Mr. Higgins actually pops out from under the basement, and Edward runs out and spots Mr. Stone with Zach outside the Iceberg Lounge. That's because New Beginnings Animal Rescue is located very, very close by at Tri-Corner. Zach and Mr. Stone are greeted by a worker from the Iceberg Lounge who says that she's going to take care of them. Now, she goes by the name of Arnie. Now, I'm guessing that this is Selina's roommate, Arnie, from the movie, and the comic ends with something's not right. Like the world is really closing in on Edward at this point, and this is where we pick up with issue 2. So in issue 2, we pick up with somewhat of a flashback of Edward as an orphan, talking to none other than Thomas Wayne. Now, in this conversation, it starts off quite nice, despite the artwork being so kind of, creative, with how whenever Edward kind of has like a flashback to this baby version of himself or the orphan version, it's almost like it's covered in corruption, this goo. You can almost look at it like venom. Everything linked with his damaged past, if you will, is seen this way, and especially with that of his orphan days, Thomas Wayne renewal being a lie and everything like that. The irony being, though, this conversation with Thomas Wayne was done with nothing but good intentions at the time, because as we know, renewal turned into something that Thomas Wayne never intended after the Waynes died. So at this point in time, at the beginning pages of this comic, in that conversation with Thomas Wayne, and a young Edward. It could have genuinely been a bright future for Edward, because Thomas asks if he likes school, with Edward saying that he likes riddles, puzzles, and numbers. Thomas mentions the renewal program and how it could help a smart young kid like Edward go to a special math and science school, and the little Edward is really happy at hearing this. Like, you can see just how cute and happy he looks, just thinking that there could be a bright future ahead of him. Thomas Wayne says his own riddle to Edward: what is always in front of you but cannot be seen? Edward cracks it in a heartbeat, saying the future, and Thomas replies, your future is bright, Edward, because remember, you matter. Which, don't forget, he was, running for mayor at the time. Sounds like kind of a mayor kind of you matter slogan to say, but no, in all reality, as we learned from Alfred, he didn't really care about the mayoral race or anything like that. He just cared about Martha at the time, and that's when all of that drama was going down, because we had that reporter Edward Elliot trying to expose Martha and the Arkham murder history there and everything like that. But genuinely, in terms of his mayoral stuff with the Gotham renewal proposal and the $1 billion donation, that was all in good faith, and the Waynes could have really helped out if, after their death, it wasn't completely fed into like vultures from Falcone, the mayor, the commissioner, the DA, just freaking everyone over the next 20 years. Back in the office, I'm guessing this takes place like a day or two later from when Edward saw Mr. Stone and Edward's caseworker Zach go into the Iceberg Lounge with Arnie. Turns out that Zach now has his own freaking office. But the thing is, ever since Edward got told that what he found, this discrepancy, the money, the $10,000 transferals, was a mistake, he can't quite let it go. So after everyone leaves the office, he keeps telling himself that it's probably nothing, and so he goes into Mr. Stone's office, finds the account, and confirms, adds up the numbers again, there is no mistake. And he wonders why they didn't listen, but then realizes there's an account for Waterfront Industries, the company that the New Beginnings Animal Rescue sends the payments to that Edward discovered, and that they represent them as well. However, in the Waterfront Industries accounts, there's a page missing, and that's when he sees a bunch of shredded paper and he starts putting it back together, and he spots the owner, the same person listed as the owner of New Beginnings, and he notices that there's been $10,000 payments to Renewal. So this is quite a big, pivotal point in Edward's journey from here on out, because again, the whole point of this journey is showing Edward's development into the man he already is from that very opening scene in the Batman when he's looking at the mayor through his military binoculars. Like, how did he get to that point? What led him to find the targets like the mayor, the commissioner, to concoct that whole plan of murders in the movie? So here he's just trying to figure out what's going on, and as he's on his way home, he's just really thinking about what he can do about this and what he's discovered. But very interestingly, this is like a really interesting point. We see a shadowy figure talking about the rats and how it's disgusting, they're eating our garbage and then spreading disease like a parasite. Rats belong in cages. But his next part of the dialogue is interesting. He says, or better yet, dead. Ain't that right, Ed? Which, the reason why this is so fascinating is because this other character is proposing that maybe these rats should just end up, better yet, dead, which could, show the slow progression of Edward thinking that maybe these people I find who are involved in this really deep corruption should die. And the reason why this is also interesting is because this other character, albeit they kind of appear as a silhouette, is very likely another side of Edward, almost like the devil on his shoulder, or just kind of a manifestation of the Riddler side of himself. And what I like about this so much is that they also did something like this in Fox's Gotham with Corey Michael Smith's Riddler. There was the kind of Edward Nigma side to himself, but then in that show, if you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There was this very kind of cool, swaggery version of him, and that was the Riddler side manifesting in the split personality. And here you can kind of see that this other person is obviously, at least what I think, is meant to be the Riddler. And it's still Edward, but he's smoking, he's got a bit more confidence about him, and Edward kind of tries to shake this off, thinking that this person he just saw and heard saying his name is just another Gotham crazy on drops. But then he also wonders, what if this is him finally cracking up? With obviously the latter most likely being the case. It's highly unlikely that was some random dude saying his name, that was the more confident, I guess, other side to himself, which we didn't really see so much in the movie. Don't get me wrong, we saw the Riddler's apartment, all of these ramblings and the journals, thousands of journals or whatever, but we didn't quite see what Fox's Gotham did. But that's because of like a whole manner of reasons. We didn't actually get any kind of point of view scenes from the Riddler in the movie until for example, the interrogation scene, or unless you want to count when he's killing Gil Colson, you never saw like one-on-one scenes of him in a mirror or in his apartment or anything like that. So maybe if we did, you would have seen maybe these other mental stresses that Edward was actually dealing with, possibly one of them being, like as seen in this moment in the prequel comic issue 2, a split personality. Or maybe hallucinating like a more confident version of himself. It's like he's projecting maybe the person he wants to be, and that person will come into action when he actually does become the Riddler we see in the movie murdering the targets. Now, all of this part of the comic is just showing Edward having this crisis. It's similar in issue 1, and I'm sure in issues to come. All while he's trying to figure things out, you get these little introspective moments where he's just barely kind of clinging on, and amongst all of that, he kind of has flashes of all of these things going on in his mind. It's always showing this turmoil he's in, and then each day, whether that's at his job or whether it's something as simple as smiling at someone, it always seems to add another coat of paint to make him feel the way he does each and every day. But regardless, Edward reminds himself to focus on the dirty money and investigate this. Again, he can't really let it go, so he decides to follow the New Beginnings animal rescue owner, Mr. June. Now, he notices him going to the bank and then going to an apartment and handing something over to this woman. And all while during these panels, we get the inner monologue of Edward just saying to be careful, or perhaps he should go home. He's always trying to like maybe just go back on this a little bit, but he doesn't have a home. Again, always the inner commentary of that mental crisis he's going through every freaking day. Now, the next day, Mr. Stone calls Edward into his office, bringing up the file that he brought to his attention the other day. Mr. Stone tells Edward to consider it taken care of, basically just, saying, don't worry about it, I don't want you to look into this anymore, and also tries to distract him with something else through bringing up Wayne Enterprises, saying that they're being sued again, and offers Edward to do a full-blown review of their accounts. Even though Edward knows this is all BS, like complete BS, he also said to Edward with regards to the accounts the other day, even though not to worry about it, he said thank you. And he's never been thanked before, apparently. And the sad thing about this is, even though Mr. Stone tries to throw Edward off the trail, and there's all this inner monologue of Edward calling him a liar, he wonders that the fact he's been acknowledged in the office of Mr. Stone, he's been thanked, and now been given like a full review of Wayne Enterprises, that maybe now something good could happen to him. Maybe this brain of his can be put to use. And as this is happening, again, it's also contrasted with liar. This guy's a liar. He starts daydreaming of working with Mr. Stone. Mr. Stone, putting his hand on his shoulder as they're reviewing the accounts or possible work they could do in the future. So it's like all of this fantasy of Edward just kind of wanting what he's kind of probably deserved. He's been working there longer than Zach. Zach's got his own office now, just wanting to be noticed, and it abruptly ends though, as this daydreaming kind of turns into a reality of that's just not what's going to happen to me. It never has, so why would it now? Mr. Stone manifests into some like ugly ass monster, and there's a black panel saying liar. And this next like portion of issue 2 kind of feels like, in movies where you get the hero origin moment, they start like designing their own suit and they start really getting that kind of quick development in a short burst naturally, so it kind of sets up the rest of the story in the movie so they can be at a certain stage to kind of go from there on out. This is kind of that villainous kind of, or at least maybe not full-blown villain moment here, but the formulation of the Riddler or Edward starting to get his Riddler mojo on, such as getting equipment, starting to like investigate more, just basically having full conviction with looking into this. So this is when Edward runs a local IP scanner and manages to hack into the New Beginning CCTV. I also like how Edward's laptop, all the keys, like the English lettering, is replaced with like the kind of cipher symbols, which is just a nice touch from all the ciphers he had in the movie. He speaks of discretion being of the utmost importance. Invisibility is my power. I have turned a weakness into a strength. Whilst he's reviewing the CCTV, he sees that Mr. June is running drops for his business and putting it through another shell company, which is Waterfront Industries, making it harder to trace, and then sending that dirty money to renewal. What's also very intriguing about these panels, as Edward's kind of doing his kind of crime fighting, I suppose you could look at it like, we also see these parallel panels with the Batman doing his crime fighting. And I like to see it that they deliberately did this in a way that just as the Batman is doing his work, standing up to the city, as the Riddler says, Riddler is also kind of doing his thing for standing up to the city, just also furthering that narrative as to how he truly thinks that him and Batman are the same. He even internally wonders about the Batman, wondering how do you do it? How did you take the leap to take matters into your own hands when everyone else around you looks the other way? Now in this panel, we see Robert Pattinson's Batman suiting up, Cowl in the Batcave, and also interestingly here, we see some batarangs along with a little knuckle duster. Now I guess you could argue this is all from Edward's perspective, but then again it might not be. It could just be like genuinely, even though the larger narrative is what I just said, kind of paralleling Edward and the Batman crime fighting. They could still be like true shots of Bruce going out on his bat bike, as you see here, gearing up in the Batcave. Whatever way you want to put it, we see batarangs. So we didn't see batarangs in the movie, yet this prequel comic is canon. So it's kind of like, why didn't we see these in the movie? Not only that, we did see actual batarangs in the Batman movie concept art book. So technically, these could be canon, and he has actually used batarangs before. I just really hope that we see them in the second movie, but a nice little detail there. Now, as the Riddler is slowly coming to be, we see Edward go into an Army-Navy store, buying bits and pieces for his journey as the Riddler, such as like little audio bugs, binoculars that we see him use in the movie, also pointing out to a little coat in the magazine, probably the very coat that he wears as the Riddler in the movie. As these panels unfold, we see him drop a little audio bug in Mr. June's pocket, the owner of the New Beginnings Animal Rescue. And he says, a fire is burning inside me, the lights are coming on again. All these rooms, dark, abandoned, alive again. And so this is when we're getting to the end of issue 2. But you can clearly tell that he's almost kind of at this Riddler stage, but I think he's still got a ways to go because he's still never murdered before. Now, what I'm wondering is, you know, is the first murder going to be someone like his boss, Mr. Stone? Is it going to be Zach? Is it going to be both of them and maybe more people? Because, again, the Riddler has likely killed before the mayor in, you know, that first murder in the Batman movie. It's just nobody really connected it to Edward before that, so he could have done a number of killings. But that's going to be a very pivotal transformation when he does do his first kill. I think that will be the thing that solidifies that silhouetted kind of more confident smoking version of himself to merge as one, and that's when he'll truly be the Riddler. So in this moment, Edward uses his military grade binoculars that he's got to look in on Mr. June and hear what he's saying, and this is when we have Mr. Stone, Edward's boss in the forensic accounting division, visit Mr. June. And Mr. Stone mentions how, you know, I've had an employee, which was Edward, who brought to his attention Mr. June's work in the books, and Mr. Stone mentions that when he looked beyond the official books at the product and cash flow, that there was someone skimming a little money off the top. Now, Mr. June completely denies this, and Mr. Stone essentially offers all the pieces of the puzzle that he's put together in how it's apparently Mr. June taking this money, says, is this you and your daughter? Are you handing her an envelope with money in it? And Mr. June is just like, that's the money I earn, and it's me giving her money because I want her out of Gotham City. Like, trust me, this is the money I earn. I'm not taking from the business. Either way, though, Mr. Stone is just like, well, someone's taking money. This looks like it's you, and you do realize that taking money from me means taking money from Falcone, and do you know what happens when people take money from Falcone? Mr. June gets taken to the back of the store, at least in the basement of the New Beginnings Animal Rescue, by Mr. Higgins, the guy who Edward asked about in the first issue, who was in the basement and came up to the store, and that's when Edward ran out. He was also in court. He also works at the New Beginnings Animal Rescue. Well, they take him down there, they chain him up. Meanwhile, Edward rushes down from his vantage point to go back to his laptop to review what's going on in the hacked CCTV footage. And while Mr. June is being chained up in the New Beginnings basement, he still insists that this is the money he earns. But then Mr. Higgins, who also, as I said, works in the New Beginnings Animal Rescue, whispers in Mr. June's ear, saying that he had to make bail, so he took a little cash off the top. I'll make sure your daughter is taken care of. And that is when essentially Mr. June is beheaded. And it wasn't him, it was Mr. Higgins. In this moment, Edward seems to be recording all of this on his laptop. And so we have a very sad ending to issue 2 because Mr. June was completely innocent. I mean, don't get me wrong, he was involved in, you know, the whole business of giving money in small installments to the waterfront industries and thus renewal and everything, but he wasn't skimming the money. It was Mr. Higgins. And the sad ending is that we see his daughter with her newborn baby at the Gotham train station, and she's got 2 tickets to Metropolis, and she's waiting for her father, who's never going to turn up. And we have Mr. Higgins turn up saying, "Going somewhere, Miss June?" And so it ends there. So a very dark ending, a sad ending for Mr. June's family, I guess you could say. But Edward was also horrified watching this. It also just shows, like, he knew maybe his boss was completely ignoring what was going on with the numbers that Edward came up with, and says not to, worry about it, consider it taken care of. Edward's calling him a liar in his head. So he knew he was up to something, but he didn't realize that he was capable of sending his own thugs to behead him in the basement. So this is just going to further propel Edward down even more to just kind of find out what's the extent of this, like what lies beyond this. If this is what they're willing to do, even though it was a mistake to Mr. June because it was freaking Mr. Higgins, but either way, how far does this go? Like, now he knows that Falcone is linked to Mr. Stone and Zack and Mr. Higgins and New Animal Beginnings Rescue and the Waterfront Industries. It's just going to keep getting deeper and deeper. I like how this issue further like, it didn't go ham on like, oh, I'm the Riddler now, I've got the mask, I've got the glasses over the mask, I've got the coat and everything, but it took those small steps into him getting like the audio bug equipment, the binoculars, the CCTV hacking. He's compiling his evidence, and he's got to find out how, oh, this is linked to the mayor as well, the commissioner, the district attorney, who gets paid 10 grand. That's also something to remember. He gets paid 10 G's a month, as he said in the Batman movie, not to prosecute certain cases. It's a funny number to consider when also 10 grand is what's being paid in these little number discrepancies that Edward is finding. I love how they get into the further kind of parallels between, or at least from Edward's perspective of, him and Batman continuing to be this inspiration to him to really pursue what's going on here. The constant insight, even in what feels like every scene of this crisis, this mental struggle that he's going through, no matter how much he tries to level himself and ground himself, it's always gnawing at him, and he focuses again. Yeah, he has this compulsion to continue on looking into what's going on. And very importantly, complemented by the very, very gritty and raw artwork that Stevan Subic provides us. It's very, very cool stuff. I love, sometimes it's like almost gets hyper realistic, and then sometimes it's very distorted. Depending on the panel, you can see such different perspectives of the artwork depending on the tone and mood of the Riddler himself. Very intrigued to see the other kind of Edward hallucination manifest more and more as well. But I'm going to stop rambling now. I would love to know what you guys thought of issue 2 of the Riddler Year 1. As you can tell, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's going along at a nice pace, considering that is 6 issues. I mean, think about it. We've already taken quite a few leaps and developments in the Riddler's journey, or should I say Edward's journey to the Riddler, already in just 2 issues. So imagine the extra things and steps that Edward's got to go on in issue 3, 4, 5, and 6 that really propels him to be that character we saw in the Batman. So I'm gonna love you and leave you now, guys. I hope you liked this video. If you did, I would really appreciate you showing that through just hitting the like button. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Links to my social media and everything like that are in the description down below. But I hope you had some lovely time off. For those of you who are chilling in the Christmas period, I hope this was a nice bonus video to you. Check out my past couple of videos uploaded on the DCU and also the Batman discussion series. But until next time, guys, until the next issue that is, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Bat family in the next video. Goodbye.